spoke briefly about events on Earth, what had happened in the last few years. She talked for over a minute. Then Randy learned that the evil constellations had taken over China, North Korea, Central Europe, South America, and Mexico. Because the invasion of the evil constellations in North Asia, it was May of the year. And South Korea, where Randy was born, was not occupied. In fact, it was one of the countries that handled the invasion well. But many Koreans have since left the country. Their immigration played into America's hands. Randy asked about the head of the clan, wondering when he left Korea. Randy wondered what his boss had been through. After all, women had always despised him before. So he hesitated to go to the Dungeon B rank. Well, living to years and having marriages, he's become a rank dragon and is swimming in money. Then Lava Cat suggested that Randy make him his avatar, but he hesitated because he didn't trust the boss very much. Randy began to think how he was going to say it to him, for it seemed very strange. Randy thought that if he explained it well, the boss could understand him, but the protagonist decided he would try to take him to the avatars. Vitya, the head of the clan, wouldn't give up and searched for him all the years. Randy read him as a trustworthy man. That's why he didn't really want the boss to be involved in constellation affairs. The next day, he and his boss went to the game training room. Then the boss used magic. The Lava Kitten was very surprised and said that it is the magic of the other side of the world. Because this magic is popular among the constellations, mortals don't know how to use it. The boss said that on the other side of the world, if Randy got hurt in battle, nothing happened to him in real life. It's like an incredibly immersive game. Constellation used that kind of magic to train their avatars. Randy asked the boss how he learned about this magic. Randy thought he learned it from the constellation, but the boss replied that it was a very common magic. Then the boss thought about it and said that maybe the constellation had taught someone. The protagonist was very surprised, because such a training war ground Earth hunters are very well prepared. Well, the boss corrected him right away. He says this field is more for sports. A lot of hunters appeared on the hologram. It was called hunting sport. They were called the 6-Star League, a game where 6 hunters fight against another team. Of course, in this game there are many rules: killing monsters, time attack, and death fights. Randy wanted to try his hand at this game. The program asked Randy to limit his power. Otherwise, the other side of the world might collapse. Randy realized that this was human magic, and it was not strong enough for the constellations. Randy was surprised, for after they had limited his strength, he felt as if something heavy had been strapped on him. The boy realized that his power was increasing, while he was fighting the limited forces of the other side of the world. The kitten said it was a good opportunity. The other constellations can't watch him when he's in the dungeon on the other side of the world. However, he could still use the power of the essence as well if he wished. But Randy still wasn't 100% sure if he should reveal Hyuna and make him his avatar. Because like Randy said earlier, he doesn't want to interfere with someone's peaceful fate. And leading the avatars from the beginning, not Randy's style. Kitten said if he fights as a constellation, there will come a time when he will need avatars. After all, it's pretty rare for a constellation to fight alone. Randy said that the magic of the other side of the world makes the hunter's training look much more realistic. But the boss again said it wasn't training. Is the best and most popular sport on Earth. That's when Randy realized they weren't doing it to train. They were doing it for fun. This sport evolved from a competition where hunters fight one-on-one. Most people love the sport. Randy was confused, because all he'd ever thought about before was the crisis on Earth. He kept practicing and worrying that he wouldn't make it. Worried and kept looking for a way back. Then Randy said that the hunters on the ground had become sports stars. Well, then Kitten said the raid has to learn that constellations are known to SL and WCHO. Randy can't understand it because he didn't have avatars. But for constellations with avatars, it's like indirect warfare. Probably the spread of magic, the other side of peace on Earth, somehow mediated by wars. Then Randy had a thought. Since they're doing this, maybe they spread the magic on purpose, to find new avatars. And thanks to this game, very few hunters go to the dungeon. Then Randy asked the boss why people become hunters if they don't go into the dungeon. The boss immediately answered that it was for the money and the glory. If a person likes a sport, he can try it. With a little success, he will make more money than he will ever be able to spend. Everyone lined up in front of the boss's house wanting an opportunity. Then the boss said enough talk and asked Randy why he went to the abyss. He thought he'd been cheated. Then Randy said that before he explained everything, he wanted to ask a favor of the boss. Randy asked him to raise the magic power limit on the other side of the world, because he was sick of the limit. Then the boss shouted that it was a room for hunters of a rank. Randy replied that he was a plus rank. His skills couldn't be properly appreciated. Randy said he broke the meter. but that wasn't enough to get him promoted. The boss was shocked to hear that. He noticed Randy had changed a lot. The boss said they'd been bribed and he'd help bring justice. The boss noticed that Randy was uncomfortable. He realized that Randy had gotten really strong. Then Randy told him the whole truth about why he went to the abyss. He said he went there to protect the Earth. Then Randy told him the whole story of his journey into the abyss. Then the boss realized that he had been hanging around everywhere and had become a constellation, and now he was back here to protect the Earth. The boss came up to him and started saying he wouldn't believe it. He read that it's impossible for a man to become a constellation. Then Randy said he'd prove it to him and show him what he could do. Then the boss realized that's why Randy asked to raise the power limit here. Then Hyung was going to spar with Randy. He wondered what he could do. The boss was not weak because when he died, he gained a rank of skill and activated the level up through death. The boss jumped up and was about to attack Randy. Randy noticed that tattoos were beginning to appear on his body. They were called artifact tattoos. Then the boss attacked him. Technique magic missiles. Purple rays started flying around the boss. But Randy was calm. He didn't need to dodge. He concentrated the small energy in just one finger. That beam flew past his head. The protagonist did it on purpose so as not to kill his comrade. Then the boss realized he wasn't weak, but he didn't realize Randy's strength yet. He knew he had to make his opponent focus on defense by attacking before they did. Then the boss used the sixth circle magic technique of the lava path, lava appearing all around him. Randy was surprised at his skills and asked him, when did he have time to learn this? But the boss thought he was looking down on him, not wanting to put him in his place. Then he made a straightforward attack and attacked him head-on, shooting him with his red ray. Randy noticed he was using sixth circle magic again. Then Randy used his shielding technique. Boss's attack didn't even come close to penetrating Randy's shield. There was a big difference in power class. Then the boss shouted something clever in China. A false rumor began to spread. Randy asked him what he meant. The boss replied that there are viral fake videos with similar skills as Randy's. The protagonist then remembered his idol, Master Li. He had not yet fully recovered from the fact that his idol was a cheat and a swindler. Randy looked at his hand and noticed that he had little energy left after the first use of the energy shield. I guess it was unavoidable since Randy's power was limited. Randy needed to control his power so that he wouldn't destroy the world back. It had been a long time since he had fought as a human. Then the protagonist promised himself that he would maximize his efficiency. He began to control his energy into one small ball. He concentrated the ball in one hand and threw it at the boss. The boss realized things were bad and he didn't have the speed to dodge, so he used a quick teleportation technique. But he didn't have time to teleport. His magic was destroyed by a powerful aura. The boss took damage from the hit. He was very surprised by Randy's strength. He didn't understand how his skill could be used so quickly. After that, Hyung decided to enhance his body with magic. His body started to be covered with pink lightning. But Randy was very quick for him. He grabbed his right arm and brought him to the ground. Randy then said to him, "Are you trying to go to a Mid-East fight against someone who uses martial arts?" He immediately started making excuses for himself, saying that he was confused because he had never fought a martial artist before. After the fight was over, Hyung held onto his right hand and said that Randy had reached the highest level of martial arts. Randy told him he'd surpassed that level, because he's on the supreme level, and if you take it one step further, you can go beyond mortality. Then Hyung completely believed that he was a constellation. After all, he thought it was very ridiculous of him. Then he asked him what Randy wanted him to do. Randy said he originally wanted to ask for help. Then he began his explanation. Though the constellations have agreed to a truce, it's only temporary. After all, new constellations could emerge from the abyss at any time. And the constellation currently in a state of truce. They may be plotting to take over the land behind our backs, because the other constellations already have many servants on Earth, and they are well known. On the other hand, Randy would have to start from scratch, so he considered it a disadvantageous proposition. Everything answered that the youngest of the clan had been defending the land of the abyss for 10 years, and he was trying to act cool because he was older. Then Hyung slammed his fist on the ground and said he'd be worried about Randy. Then he asked him what he meant when he said he wasn't going to ask for his help. Randy said Hyung has his own life, so he doesn't want to get him into this kind of trouble. He got angry at those words. He shouted that he would help him, and he was in a bad position not to accept his help. Hyung didn't want the man he knew to be drawn into a battle between constellations, but he knew Randy wouldn't back down. The next day they sat in a cafe and discussed the future from Earth. Hyung said that in his whole life, he never thought he would make a pact with a constellation. He realized that to serve under a constellation meant selling his soul to them. Han asked Randy, if he makes this pact, won't every action of his clan be tracked? Randy replied he wouldn't do that if he wanted to. Randy thought of a plan. The plan was to start by hiding the fact that he was a constellation. Then Hyung realized that he had to hide his power like the constellation so they wouldn't be burned. Randy said that either way. He's going to keep increasing the number of servants while hiding the fact that he's a constellation. He said he would need servants when he encounters other constellations. Hyung was already setting himself up for the battle. He wasn't afraid of how hard the battle would be, even if it was against a constellation. Randy said the magic that's often used in sports is called an alternate universe. It's also used by constellations. After all, it was quite strange that people participating in hunter competitions were using this magic. The reason why this magic is so widespread is due to the fact that constellations fight in a similar manner, as the servants of the constellations are sent to do battle with each other. Because there's a good chance that the constellation intended to make the hunter competition as easy as possible for them to choose a servant based on their level of performance. But Goblin disagreed with Randy. He thought it was speculation. He didn't believe a constellation could look at such nonsense. Even now, most constellations are beating in agony with boredom. In any case, Hyung realized that if he had to fight with Meadow like in the hunter competitions on Earth, it could be a great advantage for him because he had participated in such battles. Randy thought it was very important to increase the servants. He must become the object of their envy. Hyung said he knew what he was talking about. Randy should have been famous as a hunter. He must be the strongest hunter. After all, when the class A dungeon opens, this is the type of hunter that the country's government will be begging for help. Even though people claim that the hunter of their strange is the strongest, they know very well, deep down, which hunter is the strongest. And he said he understood, and he thought Randy certainly had the necessary abilities. But the problem was how they would demonstrate them to the world. Hyung said he knows how many groups he's responsible for, and it's not just one clan. All cores and items in the dungeons are bought by the company, as well as extra support with bonuses and so on. As long as Hyung's servants prove their loyalty, they will reward you generously, which is why people want to get into this clan all the time. Well, Randy didn't understand why he was telling him to join the clan if he could do it without him. Then Hyung slammed his fist hard on the table and shouted that Randy wanted to hide the fact that he was a constellation. He needed to hide his power properly. Randy said he was right, but Randy decided to limit his power to the maximum level. So as long as he can control his energy, he should be fine. Hyung said he'd send him to a clan that accepted the best candidates, so he could look for some nuggets there. After all, Randy could take them as servants if they proved useful enough. Randy agreed, and said it wasn't a bad idea. Well, Randy was afraid they'd be against it since few people like hunters who use martial arts. Hyung Tai also agreed that they wouldn't like it at all, because once they reach A-class, they will become strategic weapons that will rule the state. Only those who have achieved high performance can be recognized as S-class. When you think about it, that's pretty amazing. After all, less than a person around the world has been honored with this title. Hyung pointed his finger at Randy and said he wanted to get started and do what they could. They were going to go to the qualifying round. This qualifying round was called Uz. Hyung said there's a lot of hunters coming, and Randy needs to qualify and win to be accepted as a pro in the league. He advised me to go to the preliminary tour in a week, and to get settled in here in the meantime. Then Hyung gave him a smartphone because a lot of things have changed in the last few years. Randy picked up a smartphone and couldn't figure out how to use it. Randy passed near the arena. The arena was very large and had a blue ball at the top. Randy immediately realized it was a new qualifier. As one of the hunters came out near them, he was in a gold sports car. Randy realized the hunters hadn't changed a bit. He wondered if the man who won the tournament would turn pro. One of the guards said that these are qualifiers for the S-Class League. Well, there will be a lot of D and E-Class hunters here as well. After all, they always have other options, so he asked Randy not to worry and see this as a rewarding experience. The guard didn't know Randy's full strength yet. At this time, Odaigon was having fun on his phone and playing games. He was curious to explore what this thing was. Randy said he stopped playing those games. He said he'd be back soon. He had to look at the building. He realized it would take all day. He was interested in competing with other hunters. The protagonist entered the tournament room of the hall. There were a lot of journalists, TV people, and YouTubers there. Randy walked into the center of the building. He entered the virtual world. He realized that he had to keep his power under control, or the virtual world would be destroyed. The protagonist began to concentrate his energy, his hands. He realized that after a while his first fight would begin. He didn't need to overdo it to keep his opponent alive. He successfully entered the virtual world. His strength and dexterity were limited. Randy hoped to use his fist of energy within certain limits. If he fought in a virtual world with limited power, his existential power would increase, and then he could use various other techniques. But Randy was in anticipation. The harder it was for him, the more his strength increased. And it was working well. His opponent was twice as big as he was physically. You could see that he was very aggressive against him. He was ready to take Randy down in a fight. His rival says he's going to destroy him. He has to run away so he doesn't kill him. At which point the referee intervened and yelled that they would be disqualified if they started fighting before the whistle blew. His opponent found out that his opponent was a martial artist. He was a bit surprised because it was the first time he would be fighting against a martial artist. He had always fought only against mages. His opponent immediately came up with a plan for the fight. He was going to keep the distance between them, use the magic of the second circle of steaming, and then use the magic missile boost. He hoped that Randy didn't know that he had passive skill-guided missiles. The fight had just begun, and Randy's fist was already near his opponent's face. It was obvious that Randy was faster than him, and he punched him hard in the face, so hard that he fell backwards onto the subway. The audience was just shocked because it was very fast and very powerful. They didn't expect Randy to win. The match was over. Randy won after seconds of fighting. Randy thought it would be much harder. He was very disappointed in his opponent. The referee raised Randy's hand and his opponent was carried out on the decking. It was a good day for him. As Randy was having a cup of tea and relaxing in his dressing room, a man approached him and wanted to tell him important things. He said that Randy was very different from the hunters of today, and he was very impressed with him. The man said most of the hunters last year were no match for Randy. You couldn't call them hunters in a real fight. Randy answered him that he had thought so at first, but now he thought it wasn't so bad. It doesn't matter where you train, as long as the strength is the same in the end. The man then asked Randy if he knew the reason he was here. Randy replied that he was a scout and had come to poach him for his team. The man replied that he was absolutely right, and he wanted to ask Randy to join the Amidst clan. Randy said it was the first time he'd ever heard of such a clan. After all, he was a returnee from the abyss, and it hadn't been that long since he'd returned. Randy wouldn't have heard of him, but the man stood his ground. He said it had to be, which made Randy labor to get his bearings, that he was worried about what to do next and which team to join. But he didn't even have to worry about that, because their plan was going to help at all. They promised that they would guarantee a 1.5-man share with a percentage of the raids. The man also promised that he would provide tremendous support, and he would be personally trained in magic by top-level hunters. But the protagonist was against it because he was only used to martial arts. The man did not understand what to say to him next. He said Zato Randy will be able to go to the dungeon together and provide growth, thus acquiring new skills. But Randy smiled sweetly and said he'd be looking for a clan with martial arts users. The man said he in no way wanted to downplay his potential, but he thought Randy was still a rank hunter. Getting promoted isn't that easy. The man said Randy would regret it because their clan is the best. Randy wondered why he would be sorry. He wondered how much they would pay him, and why they had decided to come to him at once, since he had only had his first fight. The man said it was the strength of their clan. He said it was courage. Well, Randy thought it was more of a trick than courage. The man waved his hands and asked anxiously what the trick was. Randy said that, for example, the man had gotten some information about him beforehand. It's been done a lot of times in the past. The main one was to keep newbie hunters for themselves by bribing the appraiser. The secretary came in and told Randy to get ready for his next fight. The man said he'd support him in his next fight, too. Randy was warming up and thinking how he would fight his next opponent. He didn't want to reveal his full strength yet. Randy decided to start by showing what the rank could do. He was itching for a fight. Before he went in, Randy decided to invest 90% of his internal speed energy force and limited the power of martial arts. His true strength is steadily increasing, but his speed is too slow. Lava's kitten thinks this is nonsense and asks what speed he wishes for. He said a good solution would be to recruit avatars and prepare a constellation temple, or it would be worth it to increase the number of worshippers. Would practically already be underway, the judge spreading his arms and telling the rules of the contest. Randy decided to test his level with his eye. He saw the essence of his opponent. His level was 81, strength 155, agility 80, stamina 68, mana 100, intelligence 63. The opponent's name was Gregory Martinez. He's close to the ranks, specializing in close combat. Only Randy didn't understand why he'd need a bow in close combat. The fight began. Martinez immediately pulled out his bow and started shooting. Well, while he was raising his bow, Randy was already under him and he hit Martinez. His opponent was knocked back about a meter by the blow. Martinez is going to have to figure out how he got that kind of speed. Martinez got angry and started to save energy. His mom was red in color. He decided to start right away with Trump's melee attacks. He attacked Randy with his strong attack. This attack was called the 1,000 Fists. All the spectators of the fight were shocked. They thought that after this technique, Randy would be finished. After all, this technique is a martial arts user Shahov's technique, but a close fight with Martinez is very dangerous. But it didn't work for Randy. He hit Martinez and he flew to the edge of the arena. Journalists thought he was a real monster because he had already defeated 2 hunters with just 1 punch. The man said he had to sign a contract with Randy any way he could. One of the men said that if you think about it, he finished all the fights with 1 punch. Another man added that this was true because it was the qualifying rounds from the ranks. But still, you don't often see all fights ending with 1 punch. Randy was on TV. He was a revelation. Everyone was talking about him. One of the reporters said Randy was pretty good, but he read that he's not the strongest hunter on planet Earth. There are much stronger hunters than him among the contestants. He thought Hunter Eugene was much stronger. He specializes in one-on-one combat. That's why he doesn't go on raids, but only against humans. The protagonist kept running down his opponents one by one. Even Eugene lost to him, even though he was considered a real contender for Randy. The audience thought Randy was crazy in a good way, because they'd never seen a hunter beaten so easily, not even Eugene. It was time for the finals. His opponent's name was Laurels. He was from the Rainbow Clan. He thought Randy's moves were obvious, and it would be an easy victory for him. Well, his opponent lost in a matter of seconds. He couldn't block his punches because they were very powerful and fast. The judge raised Randy's hand and said that this was the winner of the qualifying round from the ranking. Randy looked up at the time and thought it was a total cakewalk for him. People couldn't believe that a martial arts user had defeated a mage. To them, it was beyond reason. In song alone, he's been practicing combat for about 10 years. His level could tell the enemy's tactics just by his breathing. Even hunters considered experts in single combat were nothing to Randy. The protagonist stood on the pedestal and raised the cup up. But to him it was only a trifle. Randy walked the red carpet and was immediately surrounded by everyone and started asking a lot of questions and taking pictures. Randy wanted to lure his rivals to his side by any means necessary. But he noticed those glances. They were not looking at him well. However, even if it was in a qualifier from the rankings, winning over all the competitors was a significant event. Randy looked like a real treasure in the eyes of the constellations. Randy realized that he'd been burned. He had to hide his power, but it was hard enough. One of the red constellations. You could tell by the look on his face that he was very serious. He warned Randy to stay out of their business. The kitten of lava and magma says that the contract on the avatar has nothing to do with the agreement, so he can do whatever he wants. The warrior shrouded in madness and blood warns that he can attack the constellation at any time without the agreement. There was a big altercation between a constellation and a magma kitten, also a constellation. Even though it was only an exchange of messages, the pressure was killer. The kitten answered the warriors with such confidence because no one knew where his territory was. A warrior wrapped in madness and blood warns that he will never forget it and declares that he will avenge all his avatars. Randy overheard the whole conversation, and he said he wasn't going to sign a contract with a loser like that. So get out. The constellation of madness replied to Randy that he didn't know what he was talking about. He didn't know that all arrogant mortals were inevitably punished. Randy replied that a constellation of madness can't even go on a rampage in front of other constellations, but he still called himself a warrior wrapped in madness and blood. Randy repeated again that he wasn't going to make a contract with him and asked him to get the hell out of here. The constellation of madness left and promised him revenge. Other constellations were impressed by Randy's courage, such as the constellation of the monk pursuing glory and the constellation of the fighter of sweat and blood. Randy said he didn't know what it was about the rest of the mortals. Well, he's going to have to fight this constellation someday. The kitten of lava and magma, impressed by the mortal's response, handed him a soul shard. The rest of the constellations interrupted in shock. Randy asked him what he was doing and didn't understand what the kitten was doing it for. The kitten of lava and magma whispers in his ear that this is part of the strategy and he needs to accept it. Soul shards among the constellations acts as currency. Now the kitten of lava and magma gave them to Randy on purpose, to provoke the other constellations. On the one hand, Randy needed those crystals so that the other constellations would look down on him. Randy thought that up to this point he had only cared about power because he hadn't even thought about such things. Anyway, he thanked Lava's kitten for it. Lava's kitten said it was important. In fact, he was a little surprised that Randy only realized it now. Hyung's servant comes in, he bows to him and says he didn't succeed. Hyung was furious and said to get that damn appraiser alive. But at this point there was an investigation to catch him. He clutched his head and shouted, "What clan is this bastard from?" He could have guessed that the Amidst clan was involved. The Amidst clan, though considered a powerful clan, is no match. After all, a powerful clan is empowered by the government itself, while the Amidst clan is just a newcomer that's just starting to gain strength. Everything began to wonder what this clan was up to against them. After all, they knew it was dangerous to deal with them in their current position, and there was a very glaring provocation. He thought the Amidst clan would enlist the support of another powerful clan that was trying to oppress them. At that moment, a girl comes in and tells Hyung that the results of the qualifying round are in. She said that Hunter Randy won sectionals. The man bowed and said he would call an appraiser right away to assign the new rank. And if there were any problems, he would take full responsibility. Hyung said he had the right idea. He was very happy to hear that he was pleased. The next day, the rank evaluator came by and said Randy was a B rank. Hyun disagreed with him and said that the evaluator was blind and should give him a higher rank. But the evaluator disagreed with him and said he gave him a decent rank, and he knew what martial arts users do in real combat. The man almost jumped on the appraiser after he said that, but Randy stopped him. He told Hyung not to embarrass him. Then the protagonist whispered in his ear that he should be careful, for the constellation had begun to take a great interest in him, and there was nothing wrong with taking things slow. Then Hyung calmed down a bit. He scratched his head and said that in any case, B rank is good too. Hyung said he wanted him to join the Iroquois clan, but if he was ranked, he'd be looked down upon. Randy said martial arts users, even with a B rank, would be ignored. Then Hyung slapped Randy on the back and said it didn't matter. After all, they knew Randy was 1,000 times stronger than them, and he'd show them what he was all about. Hyung reached into his bag and said he had a nice gun in his collection, and he decided to give it to Randy, but Randy didn't understand why he needed a gun. Randy said he didn't even know what he was getting him. Hyung said he'd look so much cooler this way. He pulled out a very beautiful sword. You could see it was very sharp. It was called the Sacred Moon Sword. It had a durability of 400 attack power. It could use the skills of Blazing Vengeance and mana regeneration after slaying an enemy. Randy said it was much better than he expected. Well, isn't that a Chinese artifact, but a rank artifact? Hyung replied that it was given to him in China. Randy said that's what all thieves say, but Hyung immediately denied it, said he was telling the truth, that the Chinese government gave it to him as payment for his help. Well, Randy still didn't believe it was a weapon of rank. At the time, China, due to the invasion of the evil constellations in the north, was on the verge of destruction. Discovered and several extreme problematic dungeons at once, and 3 A-rank monsters burst out. The first monster was Ubume, the second monster was King Mehu, and the third monster was Baiji. Then Hyung went to help and received the gift of this. The 3 animals gave him strength. Then Hyung said they should forget about it because he wanted Randy to meet his manager. He said he already had a daughter. Randy couldn't believe it. He thought his daughter was his niece, even though they were about the same age, because Randy was in his late teens. The next day, Randy cooked a delicious steak for the girl. He really enjoyed cooking. She knew right away it was her favorite. It was Texas barbecue, brisket, weighty chunks of meat marinated with seasonings and then smoked for a very long time. However, this spicy brisket turned out to be much more flavorful. The girl's name was Ain. Randy said that the secret to flavor is magic. There is actually a special magical flavor that cannot be compared to other tastes and aftertastes. Unlike the dishes, the meat the Ainu had been given was full of magic. The Randy goblins looked at her and whispered, for they did not understand what was happening to her. Suddenly, she jumped up from her chair and said that Randy should become a chef because it was delicious. She suggested that Randy open a restaurant and the girl would be an investor. Randy was confused and said he liked Korean food better. When the food was gone, the girl suggested that they should get back to business and said she'd be Randy's manager. And she asked him if he knew her duties. Randy replied something like overseeing schedules and movements. But the girl said a first-class manager is a little different. The girl said she knows at what ability the hunter is at, what it takes to make him stronger. Analyzing all of this is her duty as a first-class manager. The girl said that she is the highest class. and that she liked the way Randy handled his fights with confidence. And she and her daddy Hyung thought they needed a real raid team. Then the girl got up from the table and said Randy was very uninformed. What I know is that the government gave this vegetable garden to a rich MP. That's the way the world is now, said the girl. She went to the window and said that the Ikoros clan is full of psychos, but their abilities were commensurate with the pay they received. If Randy was going to join her, he'd have to be trained to match them. After that, the girl gave her number in case Randy needed him to call. After the girl walked out the door, she thought, as her father Hyung said, that he looked too normal for a returnee from the abyss, and he had a very huge amount of self-confidence. She wanted to teach him so that he could resist magic users. After all, he would soon have to face the monsters from the B-rank league. Well, the girl didn't know what Randy was capable of. The next day, Randy and the goblin were working out at the gym. The goblin said that if anyone from the clan came after him, he would destroy them at once. But the main character said not to do it. If he wants someone, he should ask them first. After that, Randy wanted to do a test. He closed his eyes and concentrated on meditation. This meditation allowed him to connect to the constellation broadcasts, for the sake of learning in advance the countless constellations that he would encounter in the future. At that moment, Randy, who was the constellation of the invincible training master, wanted to challenge any constellation to a fight. Well, not one constellation decided to fight him. They all ignored him. Lava's Kitten and Magma says that only constellation not on the same level responded. A constellation fight is when two constellations choose an avatar and compete. The loser pays the appropriate price. Of course, they have to be on the same level. But the name of the training master isn't familiar to anyone. There's no reason to accept a fight from the constellations. What to take? The protagonist scratched his head and said there was nothing left for him to do but make himself known and recruit avatars. Randy wondered why there was no news of the virtuous goddess of scales. Randy began to worry about her in case something might have happened to her. The morning of the next day. This is the Ikoros clan training base. The manager said there are individual training rooms and dormitories. Plus, he added that everyone has a different set of abilities and everyone trains differently. Anyway, he let them know if they needed it. Then Randy said he was going to the training room and asked where the goblin would be during that time. Well, the goblin had something to do. He showed the toy he was going to play with. This game was called Golden Escape. The goblin liked it very much. Then the protagonist realized that he was really hooked on this game, but he wasn't really paying attention, and he wanted to start muscle strength training as soon as possible. Randy just walked into the gym and saw a very pumped-up girl in front of him. The girl was doing bench press exercises at this point, and she had an incredible weight on the barbell. Randy got closer, and he noticed that this barbell weighed about a ton. He realized that this was a very strong melee hunter. The girl noticed him and asked the guy if he cared about her, since it was the first time she'd seen him. Randy smiled and said he was impressed with the girl's training. The girl smiled that she was very pleased for such a compliment. She greeted the guy and said her name was Beth. When they shook hands, the girl withdrew her hand with fear. She was shocked because it was the first time she'd seen a man who was stronger than her. Then she realized that he was also a melee mage. Norm said he's a martial arts user. Those are completely different things. Randy asked her if she was surprised. Beth said yes. How could she not be surprised? Because she didn't expect to meet a martial arts user of B rank. She wondered where Randy trained. The protagonist wondered if she was telling it like it really was, because she was unlikely to believe him that he'd been years in the abyss. The girl realized that martial arts weren't so useless. After all, she thought she was capable of learning anything that could be used. The girl was very determined, and she said she was ready to learn any sport. She showed Randy her fighting moves. Randy was quite surprised. Freddie said that she could fight off zombies and monsters. Beth said she was a member of a ranking league and ranked 19th. But this was the first time Randy had heard of the league. The girl wanted to test the guy to see what he could do. She told him to follow him. They came to the hunter's training room. It was quite large. There was a white-haired guy waiting for them. He was practicing and holding a punching bag. He asked the girl who the guy next to her was. The girl pointed her hand at him and said that he was a beginner martial arts user. He said his name was Anthony, but he thought they'd recognize Randy because he's a popular person. So Randy said he was seeing him for the first time. Anthony began to tell me that he had cleared a dungeon called Siege of Okarash and set a new record for night raids, and in the shortest time possible he had risen to rank B. The girl said that he had returned from the abyss and could not know about him in any way. Then Anthony said there was nothing to be done about it and said he was the ruler of the clan. He invited Randy into his clan and said he had to obey him, and then all problems would be solved. Randy asked the girl if Anthony was a psycho because his behavior was very strange. The girl told him to leave the situation because he was always like that. They got in the ring and they were ready to fight. Randy noticed that the girl was eager to go into battle, and he wanted to teach her one thing so she wouldn't go near a martial artist. He attacked her with a very fast attack, but the girl managed to block the blow with her sword. Then Ben started fighting very seriously. She realized then that martial arts are very dangerous. Randy was surprised that she had time to block his blow. He realized right away that she had a great reaction. The protagonist cornered her and attacked with powerful blows and fast ones. After all, he had read that no matter how fast the magic was, the girl was still inferior to a martial arts user's blows. Ben decided to just spice up the punch with magic power. She practically hit Randy. You could see that Randy was surprised because no one had ever hit him like that before. The protagonist realized she was a very good fighter and had a pretty good attack speed for a magic user. Randy immediately wanted to recruit her into the avatars. The girl wanted to use protective energy. She concentrated a great deal of mana in her right hand. But Randy just punched her in the stomach, a regular low blow for him. He didn't want to overdo it so he wouldn't accidentally hurt her. Ben lay on his knees and asked how his blow had gone, for she was sure she had activated the magic. Randy replied that he had used a different force for the blow. That's different from strengthening muscles with magic. But the girl didn't want to give up, so she decided to attack again. The protagonist began to play with her. It was obvious that she was no longer strong enough to continue the fight. He wanted to demonstrate his abilities so he could recruit this girl into the avatars. But Randy doubted that she would agree the first time. The protagonist looked at her face and thought he'd overdone the attacks. But Ben liked it a lot, and she wanted to continue this fight. But the main character attacked her one more time and she fell to the ground. Then Randy asked her if she'd had enough. The girl said he was really good at fighting, but she wanted to fight him again. The guy asked her if she was not going to fight until victory because she had chosen the wrong opponent. But the girl could hardly stand, but she wanted to continue the fight. The protagonist began to knead his fists, for he liked such persistence. The rest of the people in that gym watched that fight with their mouths open. The girl was pathetic to look at. Her whole face was like a tomato, and she said she was done for the day. Well, Randy got excited. He started telling her she was being weak, because now the fun is about to begin. But the girl screamed to be rescued from the psycho. Ben was lying on the couch, unable to get up, saying she'd never been so tired in sparring. Randy said he hadn't had enough training, and asked the girl if she was interested in martial arts. Beth said not a drop because she was sure she could beat Randy with her own strength, and she promised herself she'd train harder and get stronger. Randy said that she could use martial arts to remove her shortcomings, but she didn't want to hear about it because it was a matter of pride. She pointed her finger at him and said that pride doesn't allow you to learn from your enemy. And from that moment on, she considered Randy her enemy. It went without saying that they would say hello when they met, but she would no longer accept help from him. Randy's face showed how surprised he was by this conversation. After saying that, the girl just turned around and went about her business. Magma and Lava's kitten, saying they should have taken better care of their opponent. But Randy disagreed, because to lose on purpose is humiliating. The next day, Ikaros training. It was a training room inside the imagination. That's where Randy met his old friend Richard. Richard was happy to see them. The protagonist asked him if he was joining the Ikaros clan too. Richard smiled and said that it was just the way things were. Randy was a little surprised, for Richard was from a rich family, and it was strange that their family had no clan. When everyone was gathered, the clan mentor came. It was a hunter of a rank. His name was Ernest. He said he hoped to find good hunters in his clan. Ernest then asked the boys what the hunter's main weapon is against the monster. He answered that he himself was the ultimate weapon, and that was the right answer. Because the power of unwavering faith in yourself, without it, nothing would have been possible. Thanks to his faith that he could become stronger, Randy also survived a long time in the abyss. One of the hunters approached Ernest and said that last year he had said different things. Ernest told him that believing in yourself is also considered a true answer, and his faith is sincere. Richard replied that it's a team effort, and it was also the right answer, because the hunter's weapon that can fight back against monsters, non-magi and non-objects. The most powerful weapon is unity. Even a ranked hunter would not go into a dungeon alone. Ernest concentrated Manu in his hand and said, "Even if he is awakened or has a high rank, people are naturally weaker than monsters. After all, no one knows what can happen in the dungeon. Therefore, one must be prepared for anything." Ernest then raised his right hand up and distributed his power to the other participants. Today was a pair training. Randy at this moment was looking at his friend Goblin Odagon. He was very happy to have him around. Then the protagonist noticed a guy who'd insulted him at the gym. He thought he was weird at the time. This guy immediately turned to Krenda. He thought that Rent was afraid of him and said that he wouldn't worry. He wouldn't hurt him so much. The protagonist was shocked by such words and such arrogance. Randy thought to himself, he's a constellation and he should be paired with this weirdo. When Ernest put everyone into pairs, he used the art of illusion of the highest level. After this technique, a purple hole appeared behind them. A very scary monster started coming out of that hole. This monster was called a wyvern. It was like a dragon-strong monster defined as B rank and above. You could see how worried the others were, but Randy didn't care because he was much scarier than Vidal, and the goblin was playing his game. Ernest noticed that the newcomers were not even afraid. But he was not surprised because the chairman would not recommend just anyone. Then Ernest ordered his animal to attack them and told them to dodge. Most of the participants were overwhelmed with fear. They realized that they were too slow to dodge such a big monster. The blonde guy wasn't afraid either, for he believed that despite his wide breathing radius, his magic would allow him to dodge easily. Then this guy used a level 3 magic called Accelerated Hashansa. The protagonist realized that they were bound by magic, and he was about to be dragged after him. That was very presumptuous. Then Randy punched him in the neck and knocked him out so he wouldn't be a burden to him. The mighty dragon directly shot with its flame at Randy and the blonde man. But the protagonist managed to fly up and save his and this guy's lives. The other curators were very surprised. Ernest's assistant asked if martial arts allowed such speed. Ernest replied that they surpassed magic in terms of speed and evasion, and this guy was the most outstanding martial arts user he had ever seen. Ernest thought it might be because of the influence of the abyss. Ernest thought that the power of his skills was incredible, regardless of rank. Such a hunter is very strong in real combat. Then Ernest realized why the chairman liked him so much. At which point the blonde woke up and was very angry that Randy had hit him, but the main character said it was because he was too slow. Randy advised him to move even faster next time. The blonde man advised Randy that he would be at a disadvantage. He wanted to use magic, and for the sake of it, he would just adjust to it. The blonde man was very angry that Randy wasn't listening to him. Bet watched them from the sidelines. She felt very strange about what they were doing there. At this point, Ernest snapped his fingers and said we'd stop there for now. He liked the way most of the hunters worked out, especially Randy. Ernest then asked anyone who failed to complete the task to leave the site. Ernest said that the next task would be an attack. Most of the hunters were very tortured. They didn't expect there would be no break. Randy began to feel that the attack would be down, for he had a very good sense of distance. Then Randy grabbed the blonde and flew up because he sensed something dangerous down below. And Randy was right, because a huge worm had emerged from beneath the earth. It was called by the ancients the sand monster, shaped like a stone-eater. It always lurked in the ground and, catching a vibration, attacks and devours its prey. It is a very terrifying predator, dwelling in Dungeon B rank and above. The other hunters were in a panic. They thought it was too tough for them. There was a great fear in their eyes. Then Ernest told them that if they couldn't even react to it, they had no right to be called hunters, and advised them to focus on training instead of grumbling. But Randy was looking forward to the challenge of being in the Iscaros clan. He said it was to his liking. After this battle, only Randy and the goblin in a human body were standing. A rank B hunter approached Randy. His name was Smallwood. He asked Randy how he knew that the monster would come out from below. Randy replied that he could tell by the sound. Smallwood was surprised because he did not hear any sounds. Thus, the clan's training continued. The next exercise was a 3-man evasion. Then training in resisting magic, containing comrades who have fallen under the influence of illusion magic. It was clear that after these trainings, most were very tired. The guy's boss said it was just a warm-up, and he said that the next training was clearing the dungeon. The main character was surprised. He did not believe that they would truly enter the dungeon. But Smallwood says that in their time, the dungeon can be modeled on the underbelly of the world. Smallwood added that Randy was from the abyss. He thought that Randy had seen a lot of things in that world. Randy began to study the personality of his opponent and noticed that he was also a melee fighter. When the protagonist saw his statistics, he was quite strong than he thought. Then Randy said that you shouldn't judge people by their appearance. By the way, if he is going to recruit him as an avatar, he needs information about the skills. Smallwood was only glad of this because he did not expect that someone would teach him martial arts. Randy said that even if he taught him without effort, he would not achieve anything. After all, only one person achieves success. In addition to master the highest category, it will take at least years. Smallwood ran after Randy and asked him to teach him martial arts. Smallwood stopped Randy and said that he was a martial arts fan as a child. Randy asked him why he didn't study these arts then. Smallwood looked at him and said that in his time, almost everyone who used martial arts of the first generation retired. There was nowhere to study. Randy clenched his fists and said it was awesome, and he agreed to be his mentor. If you show your abilities, the prestige of martial arts will rise on its own. The main character gave him a very strange exercise. Smallwood was very uncomfortable, but the main character told him to be silent and feel the flow in his body. After that, Randy pinched his head from both sides and told him to hold the pose. When Randy asks him, "Don't magic users use mana to strengthen the body?" Smallwood replied that this is not done through the body, but through the use of one's own mana, because they attract magic from the outside. Randy was surprised because he didn't know how it really works. Then he thought of starting the circulation of his own mana. Randy put his hands on his back and told him to take his time anyway. If he can't control it, Randy will contain it with his own mana. Randy decided to take a risk because he thought that mana and Nigong were similar. But fortunately, everything worked out. Smallwood asked Randy if there was any other way. Randy replied that there was no, and this was the best way he knew in martial arts for a magic user. And it's okay, such a big expense. The main thing is that the blow turns out as it should. Smallwood hit the air with his right hand, and a lot of mana was poured out of his hand, and he received the skill of a blow shrouded in mana. This technique enhances the mana strike, replacing Nagong. The higher the user's level of understanding, the lower the chance of failure. Smallwood was pleased. After all, he did not expect that everything would work out for him. He had completely different sensations than from a simple blow. Then Randy thought about the use of mana in martial arts, but he had a very low impact level. A short time passed after the inner training hall. Then the commander clapped his hands and said that the break was over and they needed to get ready for the next training. He looked at his journal and said that now he will explain everything. What kind of training awaits them? And he said that the 6 would form one group and go into the dungeon. Your task is to clean it quickly and safely. The participants were in anticipation. It was clear from their faces how they wanted to tear everyone apart and pass this test. Randy noticed the ferocity in their eyes. Then Smallwood said that in his clan, only the first team participates in real battles. If you show up in training, Randy might get there too. Smallwood said that he is not assigned to the first team, but he participates in their competitions quite often. Then the main character looked at him and said that it's okay because you don't need to be ashamed of your weakness. Smallwood said that he was not weak at all and had nothing to be ashamed of. Then Randy grabbed him by the shoulder and said that he was great. After all, he compensates for this with his efforts. At this moment, the head snapped his fingers and said that they were starting to formulate groups. Then he showed them a table and said that using this table they would find their participants for the group and they should start training. Then the main character noticed that they did not intersect with Odaigon in any way. He was wondering if they did this on purpose. The girl held her head and said that she was unlucky with the group and their group was doomed to failure. Randy said that she offends him because she underestimates his strength. Then the commanders began to consider the participants. The first participant was Randy. This was a hunter who had not yet recovered from returning from the abyss. Returned from the abyss after years. The next participant is Richard Parker, third son of the Parker family. The next participant is Anthony Schnander. This was a guy who completely lacked team spirit. And there were 2 more participants, Smallwood and Hittaker. Elizabeth held her head and said that she had never been kicked out of the first team, but this time she was sure that they would lose. But Anthony told her not to worry, because he would protect her, and that she should trust him. Then they will be able to say that Anthony is striving to take a leadership position. Randy didn't mind. He didn't care who the leader of their team was. Anthony told them to listen to him and follow his every order. The main character asked the girl what abilities Anthony has. Elizabeth replied that he is a generalist. He likes long-range fights, and he excels at close-range combat. Apart from his super strange personality, he has some pretty rare skills. Then the chief used the eye to look at his statistics. After all, he did not plan to recruit him as an avatar, but after the girl's words, he decided that he needed to look at his statistics. When Randy looked at his skills, he was quite surprised because he was strong. The main character thought that he was a natural psycho, because he was too narcissistic. For a hunter, using his abilities is also a kind of training. The more you use them, the better you become at them. 2 skills that Anthony has. These are mental defense and narcissism, each above rank B. When Randy looked at him, he realized that these skills could help him maintain his spiritual strength. At this moment, one of the participants approached. His name was Whitaker. He ended up on the same team with them, but it was clear from their reaction that they treated him very badly. Randy asked the girl why they were acting this way. Elizabeth replied that this guy only has money on his mind. He is someone who judges people based on personal gain. Then the guy said that he was not such a bad person. The whole point is to give and receive back. People just can't accept it. The guy read that he gives as much as he gets from it. The main character said that this sounds very reasonable. Smallwood spread his hands and said that this guy should not let him deceive him. Smallwood pointed his finger at him and said that when he was in the first team, he was friendly towards him, but as soon as he could get into the second team, he completely blocked him. The guy said that he was a B-class hunter, and he was a high-demand healer. He suggested that everyone work together because it was beneficial for both him and everyone. Randy was surprised and said that he didn't need it. The main character said that he could fight just fine without all this. Whitaker said with alarm that he should not say such nonsense. After all, he believed that every hunter should need his abilities. The guy approached Randy and said that even if he uses martial arts, you should try his magic, which will work on everyone. Randy said that he really didn't need it. It was clear from the guy's face that he was very dissatisfied. He believed that all hunters needed his abilities, but here he was rejected and humiliated in front of everyone. Whitaker turned around and left, thinking that Randy had not yet adapted to Earth after wandering through the abyss. The guy believed that Randy would soon realize that he was missing out on a big opportunity. Some time passed as the team descended into the dungeon, which was called the Test of the Snake Path. The girl opened the map and said that according to the rules, it is necessary to clear it as quickly as possible. Do not interfere with the opposing team. Elizabeth then suggested that they need to make sure they have food and supplies for the weeks, and then we'll split up and go inside. But Anthony disagreed, because he believed that he should be able to focus on magic. The girl said if he doesn't like something, he should just leave. Anthony took 3 steps forward and said that he would stand in front. Elizabeth began to shout at him. She believed that he was talking nonsense because he could be ambushed and would be forced to engage in close combat. The girl believed that she, as a melee expert, should have stood in front instead of him. Elizabeth approached him and told him that he should obey her orders because it made a lot of sense. After all, she believed that he was not as good in close combat as she was. Then the guy turned to her, pointing his finger at her, and said that he was better than her and shouldn't be ashamed of it, because she would be an incredible hunter if she could cope with him. The girl could barely restrain herself. She wanted to hit him very hard to send him flying, but she understood that they were a team, and a fight was not the answer. Anthony again said that he would go first, and that his partners could help him from behind. Then Randy ran forward. This really surprised Anthony because he didn't understand what he was doing. Ahead he met a stone chameleon monster. He was considered quite dangerous. But the main character destroyed this chameleon with a wave of just one hand. For him it was very easy. Randy looked back and told them to hurry up and start joining him. Anthony ran forward to overtake Randy because he believed that he was the commander and he should be the strongest. Then he saw a chameleon in front of him. This chameleon was quite large and dangerous for him. He used the Hashan's acceleration technique to attack him from behind faster. But he didn't succeed because Randy was ahead of him. Then Randy took out the sword that his old comrade Hyung gave him. This sword was considered the national treasure of China. It was called the Heavenly Moon Sword. Randy has changed the appearance of the spatial storage device obtained from the stone serpent, and now wears it on her belt. Thus, he can get anything he needs at any time. Then he picked up this sword and thought that he should try with a faster sword. Anthony turned to him and shouted that it was his chameleon. Then the main character told him, shouldn't he save his strength for a stronger monster? You're our trump. Randy said this sarcastically, but Anthony took these words seriously. Anthony thought and said that Randy's logic was perfect. Anthony waved his hands and told Randy that he would deal with a monster stronger than Randy. The main character continued to destroy the monsters one by one. For him, it was very easy. Anthony was very dissatisfied because he did not have time to kill monsters for Randy. Then he grabbed his head and told himself that he was strong and he would not lose. You didn't go up to Randy and tell him that from now on he would be completely serious, and he promised to show Randy his ability at 100%. Elizabeth was very unhappy with the actions of Randy and Anthony. She believed that they could not do whatever they wanted. After all, there were traps everywhere, and they had to be careful. The girl thought that only Anthony was worth worrying about, but they were both sick bastards in the girl's opinion. At this moment, the commander was watching them from the conditions room. The partner asked Ernesto if he planned to permanently join Anthony to the first group. After all, objectively speaking, Anthony is quite good in battle, the commander agreed, but he has problems with cooperation. Every time he participates, teamwork completely disappears. The guy said that his growth has slowed down a lot lately. It is obvious that he is not interested in training properly, but he is a hunter who will be worse off if he ends up on the second team. Then Ernest said that they still need to observe them to draw a conclusion. If everything continues as it is, he will make a decision. Ernest went up to the girl and asked what happened. The girl replied that it would be better if he watched it himself. They saw that their team's work was completely smooth. Even Anthony calmed down a little and obeyed the commander. The main character said that he would take on 3 monsters in front, and the girls would give monsters on the side. In this way, they divided the number of kills so that there would be no quarrels and everything would be fair. They destroyed these monsters in batches. Randy said that this was not all. They need to prepare even more. Smoget said that the girls need to take care of the monsters because others are coming. Elizabeth was angry that they were giving her orders. She believed that she knew everything. When Ernest watched this, he was shocked. After all, he did not expect this team to work together. Elizabeth couldn't believe it either. She didn't expect to pass this test so consistently with such a group. The girl turned and suggested that they rest a little. After all, she believed that they needed to restore their magical power. Stallwood thought it was a good idea and said that he and Whitaker would stand guard. But the main character shouted that there is no time to rest, because there are enemies everywhere and they need to prepare for battle. Anthony supported his words and said that they need to hurry. The girl was surprised that he trusted someone's words. Anthony approached Randy again and told him that he would show him what he was capable of. Anthony told Randy that he didn't need to despair. "Even though you're not that impressive, you're pretty good," Anthony said. The main character sensed danger and fought off the attack with his right foot. Elizabeth was surprised because she did not see where the attack came from. Anthony began to mock her and said that this monster is called a stone gargoyle. Stone gargoyles. She has high endurance and attack power. A stone chameleon shaped like a devil. They are able to disguise themselves as stone, so this enemy can turn out to be a real thorn. The main character said that they have nothing to worry about because they always attack when we are distracted. Ernest's team watched from the sidelines and were quite surprised that Randy was controlling Anthony's character. Ernest said that he has leadership qualities. It is not surprising that the chairman recommended him so much. But Ernest was upset that he was a martial artist and not a magician. The assistant told Ernest that the group was moving too fast and was quite dangerous. Well, the Armenians said that they know what they are doing, and if they are destroyed, it will serve as a lesson for them. Ernest believed that luck is also, in a sense, this ability, and you need to be able to possess it. Trials of the Snake Path, one of the dungeons about which information is open to the public. This is a dungeon where, years ago, China invited a group of A-class hunters on a raid. Although the monsters that appeared there are only B-class, this combination of monsters inside is very cruel. Removal is difficult to handle, which is why this is an A-class dungeon. At one point, the main character was attacked by a stone gargoyle. It was a fairly fast attack. But the main character repelled her attack and killed her with one blow. When Ernest and his assistants watched this, they were quite surprised how he dealt with this monster so quickly. Then Ernest thought that he might have fought with them in the abyss, because the way Reggie reacted to her attack suggests that he had met them before. Ernesto wondered how long he had been in the abyss. Elizabeth said it was a trap, and she said that they should stop here to look around instead of recklessly moving forward. The majority calculated that this was a good idea, because as long as they were open on all sides, their situation would worsen too much, and they would simply return to this road. But Randy was against it, because he said that this monster was too easy for him, and they should move on because this monster was Class B. Elizabeth remembered Ernest's words to be destroyed, also a type of training. After all, she believed that they could not cope and would not give to the end, because they acted recklessly in Elizabeth's opinion. The main character made a tent and said that in the past he had to do everything with his own hands. Then he turned back and noticed that everyone was looking at him very askance, and asked why they were all looking at him like that. Then the girl took out a magical thing and said that it was a new acquisition. The girl put him on the ground and said that they would use him as a sentry. The main character said that this will not work on stone gargoyles. Elizabeth agreed with him, but it would be better than just doing nothing. Whitaker used magic called Motion Detection Ignis. A circle formed in his hands. After this magic, a blue shield appeared that surrounded the tent. Whitaker said that magic for detecting the movement of living beings is very useful. Then he asked the girl, "Isn't it useful in this situation?" The girl replied that all these conversations began only because of the use of magic, and that he began to behave like Anthony very arrogantly. Whitaker smiled and said that he could heal, buff, and also set up an alarm for the camp. When it comes to non-combat situations, you really can't find a great hunter like me. Elizabeth replied that even if he said so, He was not relieved of his duty as a duty officer. The guy got angry and told her who she took him for because he didn't try to refuse duty. The girl perceived him as an idiot obsessed with money. Smallwood perceived him as a bad person who doesn't think about anything other than money. Anthony perceived him as ordinary trash. After these words, Whitaker ran up to Randy and said that their words were too harsh and asked Randy if he thought so. Whitaker took Randy by the shoulder and said that his comrades say two cruel things. They are evil people who insult their own comrades. Elizabeth and Smallwood were surprised that he was acting this way. They thought that perhaps he realized the value of Randy during today's hunt. After all, each of the participants understood who played an important role today. The one who played the biggest role was Randy, who led the group in vanguard, a martial artist returning from the abyss. Everyone had little food, so Randy said that he would cook them a stone chameleon. His comrades looked at him like he was crazy. They understood that he had been in the abyss for a long time, but for them it was very strange. At the same time, in the instructor's room, they saw that another group was moving towards the center, and they understood that the gargoyles would soon begin to move. They were wondering if the team would be able to repel the gargoyle attack. The entire Seacat group was destroyed. Half of Agnes's team was also exterminated. All survivors retreat. Ernest said that it was too difficult for them, and they failed the task. One of the assistants said that since some hunters are running away, the rest will now have a hard time, especially this team. Then he noticed Randy's team and was surprised what they were doing now. At this time, the main character was preparing a stone golem. He cooked it in his golden frying pan, which was given to him by the lava cat because of joining the alliance. The girl said it looked pretty tasty. Stallwood thought that they all needed to calm down because that's just what it looks like, but they were all interested in trying his food. When Ernest cooked it, it looked quite delicious. He combined chameleon meat and rice, but the main character did not say that he was not going to treat them to this. It was clear from the reaction of his team that they were very angry. Well, Randy added that they said monster meat looked bad, so he just wanted to show them what it should look like. Anthony took 2 steps forward and said that he didn't say that. The pillar was behind him, and he was very angry because Anthony had said this many times. Then Anthony